Everyone, welcome in this new episode of the GyMidas podcast. Today we have a very, very interesting guest. Very interesting, and I want to say is marketing the way he did stuff, but also in results wise. So I'm gonna let Thomas make the introduction. But before we go into that, make sure that you take a look at the link in the description, guys. As every episode, we do a playbook of what we covered today, so that you can take some action steps to actually better your life with what you listen to or watch today. So make sure you check the link and yeah, change your life in a good way. Without further ado, I'm going to let Thomas introduce his guest and let's get this one started.
Yeah. So as an introduction, I would say like Mark helped me through years without knowing me. Like he goes through a podcast with his own podcast. He was involved in the Gym Worldwide podcast with all the good guys over there. He was
Hmm.
known for having like generate, I think 35 million in revenue in 12 years or something like that with
Hmm.
his own business, Mark Fisher Fitness in New York, I think.
That's right.
Something over there. You have your own business of helping gym owners through Worldwide, which is a business for unicorns or something like that, a
That's correct.
BFU. You can send me, but I think that you were part of the Inc. for 500, 400 companies or something like
Inc.
that, which is like,
500. Yep.
yeah, which is like
That's right.
one of the 500 fastest growing companies in the
Hmm.
US or something.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so very, very impressive for like a business, like for example, because like we were more about right now AI, not services based, like
Yes.
gym owner. So very interesting guy. So me a pleasure to meet him in real life, actually real. So
Yes.
we are going to move everything through that. Maybe to give you some context, is maybe because your background is not a coach. I think you were part of the Broadway part, or so
That's right.
maybe goes to that background to like
Hmm.
introduce yourself, and then after
Yep.
why a guy, an actor, actually coming to the gym
Yeah,
world.
that's right. Yeah, so for context, yeah, that's true. I moved to New York City to pursue a career as an actor and did that with some middling success, but simultaneously, like many actors do, you do other things. And in spite of somebody that grew up not particularly doing sports or feeling particularly good about my skinny ass body, when I got to New York, I wanted to look a certain way because I thought it would help my career and I thought it'd be more likely that girls might kiss me. So I got really in training. The probably two things to understand about me is I'm obsessive about learning and I'm very enthusiastic. So what that meant was I was obsessed about reading everything I could about strength and conditioning, training, nutrition, eventually psychology, business, and I'm enthusiastic. So what that means is I don't shut up about the things I like. Unfortunately, I'll just drag you into a conversation about my passions. And as it happens, that proved relatively profitable. And I sort of developed a training business concurrently with my middling acting career, where I became somewhat a known commodity in the New York City theater community as somebody that knew what they were doing, that got good results, was fun to be around, didn't make them feel bad. And what happened was that business really started to kick off. I decided I wanted to stay in town at a certain point because as a New York City actor, oftentimes you work outside the city. And I got to a certain age where I decided, okay, I think I want to try a little bit more effort into the training thing. In very short order, as we always say, we accidentally started a gym. I think the other thing that is relevant for today's conversation, you have alluded to for people not familiar with Mark Fisher Fitness. If you look it up online, you will see many colorful pictures. So we didn't call our clients members because my friends were not gym people. We called them ninjas and they didn't like gyms. So we called our home the Enchanted Ninja Clubhouse of Glory and Dreams. And the mascot was the unicorn, and it looked like you gave a 4-year-old psychedelic drugs and had them decorate, and just like, oh, let's do pink here and glitter here and rainbow here. So it was a very wild ride to bring us up to just today. Yeah, as you mentioned, we were very fortunate because the business did very well financially and because the brand was so weird and strange that we got a lot of both local and national media, both in the fitness industry, but also like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. We did a TEDx talk. I mean, it was bonkers. I loved it a lot. I did run that business for I think 13 years, and then a couple years ago has happened. Had some transitions in my family. Both my parents passed away. I had a 2-year-old kid, and I was like, okay, I think I feel complete with this journey. And for several years, I had been relatively informally doing consulting and coaching and a lot of speaking, having a background as an actor. So a couple of years ago, my business partner, Michael, and I decided to sell Mark Fisher Fitness to focus on our other company, Business Unicorns. So these days, I do gym business stuff all day long. The other thing that I think is relevant to today's convo is I still own a gym, but I own a non-personally branded, non-crazy, normie gym in New Jersey. So it's not even in New York City. And that is a 6-on-1 small group personal training model. So it's a little more similar to the types of gyms that most people that I work with have, right? Mark Fisher Fitness was wonderful, and I'm so proud of it and amazing. And I'm the first to admit it was a strange and atypical gym. There are certainly things one can learn from it. There's probably a lot of things I would say it would be misguided to try to use in a typical gym. But anyway, I think I'll pull up there, but I think hopefully that's some context for people for who I am, what my background is, and what I do.
No, for
Yeah.
sure, man. That's really helpful. And actually, it's so interesting that there was one thing when I took a look at the business that you created is, okay, how, because you have like, of course, the branding part, which was, I think, very much part of the success of what it was. And of course, there is the business acumen, the location, and all the things. So
Yeah.
I'm curious because now you have, well, of course, coaching of gym owners, but also the dimension of yourself owning another gym in a more,
That's
I
right.
would say, a more normal gym per se, if we can call
That's
it
right.
that way.
That's right.
What would you say, like looking back at it, you made right or wrong that actually got yourself to, having a good the business that it was actually at the end?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things we did right. The first thing we did was, I think what is not always appreciated was how good the actual training product was. So the thing I think we did right was from day one, we focused on the interpersonal reactions and hiring and cultivating a culture that was founded on how do we make people feel welcomed and seen and cared and loved. And importantly, not to be underappreciated, we were also very good at the training. I always say when someone's deciding if they're going to hire any sort of training coaching gym, when they're looking at the staff, they're asking two questions. One, are they warm? And two, are they competent? Which is to say, do I like you? Do you like me? Do I feel emotionally safe with you to do body work, which can be very intimate for people? And two, are you competent? If I am a very affluent, rich, hard driving 57-year-old executive, your 25-year-old trainer better strike me as someone who's competent, because even if I don't know training, I do not suffer fools lightly. And Mark Fisher Fitness, I think because it was such a strange brand, I don't know, it was always clear how serious you were. I think the people that knew MFF intimately knew, like, okay, we would put the training in that facility up to, at its peak, any other facility, probably crazy to say, but I honestly think we were as good as anybody would find. Okay. So the training was right. I think caring about people mattered. I would say from a marketing perspective, there were a lot of things I did that were the right move, particularly at that time. The most important of which you can still do now, so potential takeaway is I just made sure everybody I had ever met knew that I had this weird gym, so that if they or someone they knew needed this kind of solution, they knew what it was, right? So that worked really well. Now, one other thing we did well that I don't think is actually that replicable is we also had the great opportunity of being entrenched in a community of, maybe a few tens of thousands of people that all were in a very specific geographic proximity. That is the master switch, which nobody else can do. Again, you'll have a lot of success running a lot of these plays, but that's how we were able to do $4 million in 2015 in a 4,000 square foot facility, right? Like that's probably going to stand for 10 years before anybody else can do that. And we did a lot of things right, but the biggest thing we did right was leverage this unique opportunity to entrench ourselves and leverage very good reputation, a very geographically tight community. Okay. Now to move on to some things that we didn't do well, which maybe has some more takeaways, maybe don't do this for listeners. I wouldn't say necessarily we did them wrong per se. It kind of worked for us, but in practice, that business was very complicated. Something that happens that always makes my heart drop and I feel sad is when someone comes up to me and I can tell inspired by Mark Fisher Fitness says, we have a very successful class product, but now we've also added small group personal training, just like you. And in Mark Fisher Fitness, that worked because we had 900 clients. So even the less successful programs were larger than any other, the size of any other competitor gym. Typically, if you are running any sort of coach-centric gym, it is hard enough to make one service good. So if you are offering, as Mark Fisher Fitness did at its peak, a large group class model, a what we called semi-private model, some one-on-one, maybe open access when we have time, nutrition coaching, a transformation program, selling merchandise, you're dead in the water. Okay. Now, listen, to be very clear, and this is, I want to, maybe this is a good moment to qualify this out loud. Doing what I do, I have discovered it is very hard to actually talk about any of this in general because there's so many if-thens, there's so many ways I think about this. Okay. So I might suggest, honestly, look, if you just want to have one complicated million, maybe even $2 million monstrous gym, and there's not a lot of density in your areas of population, you might need to sell more things to the same people. If you want to have 10 gyms, you generally don't, you want less services. And although Mark Fisher Fitness was very successful, Michael and I have, I think, some pretty strong chops as far as operators. And the two of us were about able to wrangle that beast, but that was a very hard business to run. Ultimately, that was part of why I sold it. I was like, I don't want to do what needs to be done to this business to make it make sense. And it cash flows and it's a beautiful business and it's my love letter to humanity, but it's hard. And I can't run this business and all the big feelings and emotions and things required because it's too complicated. And I'd rather just sell it and focus on other things that give me a little bit more brain space. So I'll pull up there, but those are some of the things we did well. And then maybe some of the things, not that I would do different per se, but that I maybe wouldn't suggest. And if anything, I would suggest if you're finding you're offering 6 different services with love and respect, I would question how certain you are that all 6 of those services are truly spectacular. And I would highly doubt that they're all equally profitable.
Yeah. My question is like, you've begun in, the gym was open in 2012, around
That's
that?
right.
Yeah. How is the trajectory from 2012 to 2020, 2024, where we sell your shares? And how was the
Mhm.
trajectory? Like, how did you begin? And then after, how you managed to hire staff, hire front desks, what was the
Yeah.
trajectory of that?
Yep. Yeah. So a great question. So, as the other thing that's admittedly atypical about my Mark Fisher Fitness journey is we shot out a cannon from day one, right? So that's a little bit unusual. I mean, we broke $1 million in our first year, really not even knowing what we were doing. So by the end of the second year, I was largely not on the floor. So my trajectory, certainly the first 2 years and the year prior, it was the Mark Fisher show, okay, where I was training a lot of the sessions. Though I got to tell you, even by that first year, part of the success of Mark Fisher Fitness, which is unfortunately not replicable, is we made some good hires. We both got lucky and we were, I guess, good people wanted to work with us. The staff we had was amazing because I'm a very strong personality. It might not be your cup of tea, but the people that I know I'm for, right? And there could have been a scenario where it was hard for anybody to want to train with other people. And even though we always got pushback when we brought on anybody else, we just had remarkable people that wanted to be part of this thing. And they were so dynamic that the clients could fall in love with the Avengers instead of just a single person.
Mm,
And that meant structurally my position in the business very quickly changed that by the end of the second year, I wasn't totally off the floor, but I was down to maybe 8 to 10 hours per week. And by year, I think 3, we had, I guess, 3 classrooms and 2 semi-private pods. So if you do the math of it, in a given week, we were probably offering 200, 250 sessions per week, I imagine. So even me doing 8 sessions per week became a drop in the pond at that point because we were offering so many sessions. So I think by the third year, I was really focused on, I continued to oversee the marketing piece. I continued to sort of oversee the product, right? So I put in place 2 fitness managers who, at least ostensibly, were in charge of the training team. Then I would oversee the program design. I would oversee the coaching of the clients. And I started focusing more operationally. Now, interestingly enough, again, I had a business partner, which again, usually I think is a bad idea. because usually the businesses are just not big enough. There's not enough meat on the bone. And the classic mistake, which some of you have made, it's okay, I love you if you did this, is you have two trainers that get together with the same skills that think this will be better, but really now you're overlapping. There's not complementary skill sets. There's not enough meat on the bone. It's a little less scary because you're not alone. Whereas in my situation, I brought on my best friend from high school who had worked as a concierge at a high level for the Four Seasons and had a master in the arts administration, where his job was aggregating data so nonprofit arts organizations could be more competitive when submitting for grants. Very different career backgrounds, very, very different career. And we each had our lane. I think the longer we were working together, the messier that got. Not so much because Keeler ever came over too much to training, but the more interested I became in the operational stuff. And certainly from the beginning, he and I shared a real interest in organizational culture and an interest in how the work gets done, how we not only design the machine so it's clear who's doing what in regards to systems, but I think the often underappreciated, certainly our industry, more ineffable conversations around the emotions that come up, how we feel about our job, how you manage someone so they enjoy the job so you can unlock, not to sound like a Machiavellian, but so you can unlock the discretionary extra effort, that extra 1, 2, 10% that the best team members give that you can't ever quite quantify into standard operating procedure. But if you want a world-class facility, that's usually what's happening. That staff is going above and beyond regularly, and they only do that if they both believe in the mission and they trust and believe in the leadership. Because if it feels like they're doing this just for some business person's goal of make as much money as possible, then usually that doesn't happen. Usually have a lot of dysfunction in the culture, which leads to the service not being as good as it is, right? Because in our business, we're selling soul force. So if the staff feels unhappy, if they feel aggrieved, if they feel undervalued, if there's important conversations that aren't happening, that presents an issue. And I'll be the first to say, Mark Fisher Fitness was not perfect. I am not a perfect person or a perfect leader. Michael and I did not always get it right. And listen, I've had over 100 employees. You could probably find, I bet I can name one or two that probably wouldn't say very nice things about me. But even then, for the most part, I don't think you would find many people that doubted our character or our desire to do the right thing. They would probably quibble with our competence, and probably rightfully so, because none of us are perfect, right? There's probably things fair to say you could have done that better. So at any rate, I'll pull up there, but yeah, those are some thoughts for that transition. Oh, I guess maybe to finish your question briefly, which was what was the trajectory? Yeah. By the second half of the 2010s, I started to delegate more and more, certainly the training product and service to the trainers, particularly as I was off the floor. It felt more and more out of integrity. Frankly, in ways good and bad, I both started either getting distracted and or expanding my understanding of the industry by doing a lot more speaking, starting to do some coaching, traveling to other gyms, developing a network, which has become important for what I do now. And then, of course, COVID happened, right? And then that was an interesting dynamic because 2020, obviously, the gym goes totally virtual. New York City couldn't have classes for 18 months. There was a year and a half we couldn't have any classes. So we developed at one point an online gym with online classes that at its peak had, I think, 900 members taking online Zoom in classes of 35. So that was also a different version of what Mark Fisher Fitness was. In some ways, to be honest, I feel like it helped elongate my life at that business because even though COVID was terrible and I was very depressed, I think like many people in the world and many people in gyms, I was so depressed. I was out of sorts for a couple months. On the other hand, I think it kind of reinvigorated my interest and love of the business because one of the things I would note, a challenge for anybody looking for scale and going the simple road is even in that complicated business, I don't want to say at a certain point you've solved all the issues. Listen, you're always growing. But at a certain point, you know how to have the conversation. Hey, Thomas, I want to talk to an uncomfortable conversation today, but we notice sometimes when you come in, you're emanating a smell, right? At a certain point, you've had those convos, right? You know what levers to pull for marketing, right? You know what the annual check-in one-on-one system is looking like. So COVID allowed me to have the opportunity to run the business remotely. Now let's talk about another thing that I don't think works great, and I've done it. I'm doing it now. but I want to be real with you. I don't think it works great. A lot of people have a dream of running the gym remotely. I think it's very hard to do. It worked okay for a couple of years, partly because the gym was mostly remote. So of course, everybody was remote. It didn't matter if I was, zooming in from Mexico for a couple of weeks, as the case may be. But as COVID came to an end, it became clear to me that my terms for continuing to do this were location independence. My option would be, if people needed me there in person, your options were, we close the gym and I fire you all, or you work with me location independent. Now, I didn't literally give people that ask, but I made the assumption that they probably want to keep doing this. And I owned and named that this is not ideal. So from that time, what we did was we really installed strong general managers, number twos. And we always had strong general managers to support Michael and I. But again, I'm a big personality. I'm going to take up a lot of air in the room, as all leaders do. So the trick of it is, and I think even smaller gyms, here's another takeaway for you. I believe to run a gym humanely and sustainably, you need a strong number two. You need at least one person that's willing to unclog the toilet or deal with an upset customer, to get tricky feedback from another staff member about you as the boss that they're afraid to say to you. You need a consigliere, or hand of the king, if you like Game of Thrones. I think even a small gym with a staff of 3 and a part-timer, I think one of those 3, you should pay a little bit more, compensate them, train them, develop them, lavish love and care on them, so that they're willing to hold down the fort when you want to go to Ibiza for a week, okay? At Mark Fisher Fitness, this became life or death because I wasn't there physically, right? So again, I think we did okay, but I think the reality is that GM position is always tricky if you're not the owner. You're like the middle child, right? Because you have to kind of do what the owner says. You don't have the risk, so you're not really bearing the risks that the owner is. You don't have the upside. You don't get the benefit. And now you can, of course, position compensation properly, but the reality is it's still a different game. When you're the owner and it's all hanging on you and you have all the risk and all the upside, it's just a different animal. And now the GM is neither fish nor famine or fowl. They're not one or the other. They're not the owner, but they're not the staff, right? They don't feel like they're the rank and file. And I've also will tell you one other suggestion for anybody that is getting their wheels churning is that is also a delicate transition when you elevate somebody the way the rest of the team, I don't want to say turns on that person, but suddenly that person, if they're responsible for their performance, their relationship is going to change in a way that is predictable and can be tricky. And I've gotten better at that, having done that now many times over the years. So by the end of the final year of Mark Fisher Fitness, to close this up, I had gotten to the place where I had no operational role in the business. And what I wouldn't have known before I did that is that was me signing my death warrant for owning that business. Because what happened was, in spite of what you might think of like, oh, you're an owner now. Everyone says that. Everyone says that. They're like, oh, you don't want to be an operator. You want to be an owner. The business runs without you. Yeah, maybe if you have a $5 million business doing 40% margins and you can pay somebody $400K and they can make another $500,000 with bonuses, and then they're very happy to make you your $2 million without you working there. But these smaller businesses, they don't have that kind of meat on the bone, right? You can only pay people so much, even if you're paying them well for the job. And in practice, I think what happened was that year wound up being harder because even though I, in theory, had more free time, now I have, on the one hand, anytime somebody sends me a beautiful email about the way that this transformation program changed my life and your staff is incredible and you've created a beautiful thing, it didn't really land for me because I felt so disconnected. I didn't really know that team member. I didn't know this client. I was very happy they had a good experience, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't a lot of satisfaction because I felt like I didn't really do much for it. I created the system in the beginning, so now I'm not really getting that benefit. And then on the other hand, I still have all the risk. So if somebody makes a $25,000 mistake, I'm the person that I now owe that money or lose that amount that otherwise I would have had in profit, right? I'm at legal risk if anything bad happens in the business. And then sure enough, the only times I'm dealing with the business are when someone is really mad. when a staff member is so mad at the manager they want to talk to me, or when a client feels so betrayed and let down by and particularly in a place like Mark Fisher Fitness, which although people love, people also would run really hot about. So by that year, yes, I had achieved the dream of I wasn't working in the business at all, but I was like, this sucks. This is for the birds, right? And the last thing I'll say about this, and we'll move on to whatever other topics you want, that was tricky was I think there was also, for me personally, and I'm not prescribing this for other people, it felt a little out of integrity because, well, I'm not doing what I don't want to do this. I just don't want to do this anymore. I've done this for a long time. I just want to do other stuff, And that was very difficult emotionally because my identity was Mark Fisher of Mark Fisher Fitness. And as I think I had mentioned, for me, my mother had passed away, but particularly my father passed away upon becoming an orphan and having a 2-year-old child in ways that were useful. I think it really shook me up, to be honest. Okay, dude, I'm pretty good about knowing I'm going to die. I think about death a lot, which I don't necessarily recommend. But I was really at that point had to acknowledge you are not living the life you want to be living. You're afraid of letting everybody else down. You need to advocate for what you need. And again, do it responsibly. And listen, in my case, I got very lucky. I found a long-term trainer and a long-term coaching client of my coaching business that I knew was a great gym owner that wanted to buy the business, because that was part of the trick too. Gyms, if you're listening, you're a gym owner, you can't put in your 2 weeks notice, right? It's not a job. You can't just be like, hey, everybody, I'm leaving, So I got, maybe you're luckier than is fair. I'm a very lucky person in general, but that was an amazing opportunity. So I'll pull up there, but I'm happy to take any more specific questions, but that maybe gives the shape of my relationship to the business while I was the owner.
Okay,
Oh, for sure, man.
Yeah.
And
Let's go,
that's
because I have so much questions.
Yeah, me too. Like so many things to go over.
Just before you go, man, one thing to notice, because I maintained that thought since the beginning of the journey. What you say is branding is very good for having clients, but it's very good also to have very good coaching guys and girls. So branding is for example, I've seen so many guys just wanting to work for SpaceX, for example, because they like Elon Musk spirit and things. I'm not judging. Everyone wants to work, but branding is the part of, yeah, I want to work with that guy or that team or in part of that dozens of coaches staff. And so yeah, it's very interesting to notice that you experience that in a gym business actually, because
that's right.
That's part of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of course brand can mean different things, and I think you're right. I think sometimes brand is thought to mean sort of the amalgamation of design elements for the marketing. In this particular context, it's almost synonymous with culture, what is the reputation of this business? Yeah. And you're right, the business started to develop a reputation such that people wanted to work there. Another potential tactical takeaway for people listening that I beat this drum a lot, one of the constraints certainly here where, as we've mentioned, hopefully I'll do work in France after this. I don't do work in France yet, but I do a lot of work in America and Canada and the United Kingdom and Australia and a sprinkling of other countries. And I can tell you in those countries, the constraint is always finding the trainers. It's always finding the people that are amazing and making the type of job and the type of culture that high level people want to work in is, I think, foundational to success. Now, the tactic here that I would suggest more people consider that we did to great effect at Mark Fisher Fitness is we hired a lot of clients over the years. That doesn't work in every market and every model, but I always say the secret key performance indicator of high performing gyms is 1% to 2% of your clientele quits their job to become a professional trainer because they have such a great experience. They're like, I want to do this. I want to do what you all do. And the advantage of hiring clients are you likely know them intimately. We all have our favorite clients. You're like, wow, every time they walk in the door, everything is better. The client already knows the culture. The client, even if they've never been a trainer, if they're a great client, they likely, they can at least move okay. They have really instantiated the standard operating procedures on the client end, right? So at any rate, I'll just put that out there. I think more gym owners, and it doesn't, depending on your model, it may or may not work. If it's a technically heavy modality, it's a little trickier. But I think one underappreciated source of team members is targeting your clients and starting that conversation early enough that if you can plant that seed, you can have them ready if and when you're ready to make another hire.
Yeah, completely understand, man. And I mean, if I like based again on my experience as well, it's always the same thing. It's either hey, I need more people going through the doors, or I need better coaches. I would say those are the main two.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
more
Yep.
profits. I
That's
mean,
right.
that
That's
was
right.
me. That would say
That's right.
maybe the top few things I see. But I'm curious to know, like, so those are like specific problems. But let's say I'm a gym owner. Like, you don't know me, I don't know you. I'm like, hey, Mark, help me figure out what's wrong with my gym. Like, how do you dissect and go and
Yep.
see, okay, what's wrong, what's good about a
Yep.
gym?
That's right. So I will first look at a handful of numbers, which are not everything, but they're how we keep score in the game of business. And I always think about it, I'm taking your top level vital signs. So it's sort of like if you go to the doctor, they're going to take your blood pressure, they're going to do some very basic lab work, maybe look at your fasting insulin or fasting glucose. They'll look at your cholesterol, not even a ton of numbers, because we know that there's a number of high level numbers that there's an issue. We're going to see them there. If they all look good, then you can move on to other stuff. But the first thing I need to understand is there's something about the business that I don't want to say is broken, but it's really foundationally flawed. So in my world, there's a bunch of different metrics I'm going to look at and benchmarks, but just to give you some idea, I want to understand what their average revenue per client per month is. And that's going to map to the coach to client ratio, because the less clients you have per session, you obviously have to charge more if you're doing a 3-on-1. Then you can charge much less if you're doing a 50-on-1. Okay. Not necessarily advocating for either of those, just making the point. The average revenue per month needs to relate to the coach to client ratio, because the number of clients you can service per session is going to impact your direct cost of the session. Okay. So average revenue per client per month. I would like to understand what is the expense, non-owner expenses of the business as compared to the revenue. So let's say if a business is pulling in, just to keep the numbers easy, so it's a big business, just keep the numbers easy, $100,000. How much does it cost to run that business and how much is left over for the owner, right? So if it costs $90,000 to run the business, okay, I mean, technically you have 10 grand left. So the absolute cash is okay. But if you're working full-time in the business, that suggests those margins are a little too thin. Further, if I'm looking at those expense numbers, and typically I'm looking for 60 to 70%, a bigger business, maybe 80 is okay. If it's a smaller business and you're really in it, or if you're looking to scale, sometimes you need to see 50, even 40% expenses. 40% usually the owner is doing a lot and it's a smaller business. So, because it's worth acknowledging, there is also a tricky, hard to quantify balance between the absolute cash and the percentage. And I think both of them matter. Okay. I will also want to understand what is rent as a percentage of revenue. What are your people costs as a percentage of revenue? I'm also going to want to understand how much square footage you have. Okay. Because sometimes people have more space than they need or not enough, but typically the former. I want to understand your utilization, right? Because I want to understand how are you offering more sessions than we need to. And then I probably want to look at some high level weekly numbers, typically how many new leads, how many people per week on average have raised their hands and are interested in coming in, how many front end offers, which could be a free offer, a low barrier offer, even a premium price, the PT first, how many sales conversations, how many new members, how many terminations, and how many active clients at the beginning of the week. If I look at those numbers on a weekly basis and ideally on a monthly basis, I can now back out a ton of stuff. I can understand what is the new leads to new member ratio. I know what the churn is as a percentage of terminating clients based on active client count. I can do some crude but effective enough for now calculations for lifetime customer value, right? Maybe I would look at marketing spend. So anyway, I'll pull up there. Those are some of the things, but I think the core principle here is the first thing I want to do is look for, are any of these numbers drastically wonky and or broken? Because if they are, we want to fix them first. The two other pieces I would move to next is usually it's going to be some assessment of the two big hands of the business. You get the clients, you keep the clients. You get the clients, you keep the clients. Now, you'll see a lot of the efficacy of those buckets of systems in those numbers. Okay, so that's part of why you want to look at them, because you're not amazing at marketing if you're not getting any leads, right? And your operations are not fantastic if you can't get anybody to stay for more than 2 months, okay? So I'm going to look at the numbers first. Then from there, I'm going to start to understand, okay, what are the systems in place for the core sub buckets of generating new leads, following up the leads, selling the leads, hiring staff, onboarding staff, trainer development, the customer service systems outside the sessions, cash management, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I mean, just to hammer this point in, guys, like most of the conversations I'm in, like I would love to be able to talk about those numbers with my friends, gym owners. Oftentimes, I don't know if that's your experience, Mark, but oftentimes those numbers are not tracked. So I think the first
That's right.
order of things to do is like, guys,
track the numbers.
Track the numbers.
Yeah. And also because if you don't, I just can't help you. That's okay. That's fine. But I can't help you, right? Because if you don't have any goals and you don't know where you are, how would I even direct you? Now, I could say, like, and to be fair, like, I guess that's kind of what I do when I do podcasts or I do like an Instagram post or a YouTube video. I just speak in generally speaking, these are good things to do. But, you know, to answer your question, yeah, I need to know those numbers. And you're right. That probably is the very first thing. And that's not uncommon, by the way, because sometimes people will, if people sign up for the Unicorn Society, right, to work with our coaching group, we're going to make them do that. They have to do that. We can't help you if we don't have those numbers. And that's hard, but we'll help you figure it out, right? Because there's a lot of things there as far as why they're not doing it, right? Do they not know how? Are they time poor? Are there psychological issues around I'm afraid of math or I'm afraid of money? Money makes me feel bad. So there's a lot of pieces there. Similarly, sometimes someone says, I don't want to join the Unicorn Society, but I want to hire you, Mark, for a day or a half day. Well, first thing you're going to do is probably, if you don't have those numbers, it might be 2 hours, 3 hours you need to do. I need you to look through all the places and get those numbers for me. Because again, it's not even a useful call. If we don't have any numbers, I don't know what to tell you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So I don't know, Gab, if you got a question, but like, my question is like, have you discovered that by, how do you say that in, you know, the philosophy, which is empirism? Do you find out by empirism? Or do you have you ever had a mentor or have a guy through, you know, empirism, which is like,
I
but
don't think so.
empirism is like, is the philosophical way of learning by doing, like learning by experience, you know, you experience the thing. So
Yep.
where did you like learn
Yeah.
all the stuffs about, you know,
Yep.
numbers,
Yep.
offers, etc.?
Yes. Yeah, I think of a few different ways. I mean, certainly I've learned by, you know, running multiple different brands in different neighborhoods, in different locations. That's obviously, I have my own experience, but that's obviously very limited, right? Because different markets, different models, different skill sets require different tools. So I have learned, certainly over the years, I have hired a lot of like, I mean, everything from like hiring coaches and consultants for my own business to obviously I've read a ton of business books. Sometimes they're useful for gyms. Often they're not, because gyms are so small. It's not always going to be applicable. Like, I'm not saying it's bad to read Good to Great, but if you have the typical CrossFit box, I guess Good to Great matters to understand, you know, how the most successful publicly held company, the level 5 leader. I don't know. And it's funny because I've read a lot of books. I've read a lot of business books over the years. And I think the longer I've been in the game, the more, I don't want to say I've become cynical about them, but the more they just feel like some consultant sending me their marketing materials to buy a thing. And a lot of it is very abstract and dreamy, but not like tactical. I'm very much like, I want to like, what do I do? Like, what do I do? So, but to be fair, some of those books have advantaged me. I think these days, a lot of what I have done is I am a student of the game, right? So if there is, and I'm delighted to add you to my list, this podcast. And I pulled back a little bit, but there was a 4-year period where I prided myself on I listened to every single fitness, gym, business podcast because there's a finite number. There were like 28. They were like 28. So if you just listen for 4 years to every single gym business podcast, because everybody that is doing what I do has a podcast for the most part. If they're doing it at a high level, it's going to be rare they don't have at least YouTube videos or lead magnets or books or resources. And I've just tried to consume everything. So part of it has been triangulating. The final place where in 2026, I'll tell you I learned the most is one thing that has been fortunate for me because of doing what I do and having the little bit of notoriety I do, apparently not in France, but in my corner of the world, is I can get people to get on the phone with me and let me fly to them or go to their gym and be like, can we just hang out for 4 hours? And God love these people. I have a list of, I can't remember, it's like 70 questions that I'll ask, 70 questions I ask about every element of their business. So, a lot of it at this point is really just triangulating. And certainly, listen, I also review, there's a number of different organizations that have various kinds of white papers, both specific to strength training gyms, but also you have broader ones like the Health and Fitness Association. So a little bit art, a little bit science, but all of those taken together, as well as now overseeing a couple hundred gym owners, we're constantly tweaking the systems based on what's working and not working. That for me has been the approach to, learn and sort of come to sort of beliefs about what these things are and what I might recommend they do.
Okay, very interesting because like I've my favorite expression is in the Latin expression. It said "nanos gigantum homeris insanites." It's like dwarfs on giants' shoulders. So you learn by the other guys working
Yes,
before you. So that was
that's
my,
right.
you were one of my giants, for example, when I was like,
It's kind of you.
but that's not, it's not like I told you in the email, it's like, it's just normal. Like I'm totally agree and honest about that. Is when I was like cleaning floor, etc., etc., you have always the time to at least listen to 1 or 2 hours podcast daily.
That's right.
And when
That's
you
right. That's right.
constantly do that, by the end of the year,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are
yeah.
700 things.
That's right. And there are, I think, more or less efficient ways to learn. I thought about this a lot over the year too, right? Because you could argue I did this the long, hard, stupid way, where I would just try to read or audiobook 2 books a week and listen to all the podcasts and just spend 20 to 30 hours per week just constantly listening to the point where maybe it's made me insane. It's certainly been very annoying for my wife. But over time, you begin to wash your mind. Like, because again, I'm not suggesting people do this. Most people shouldn't. It's kind of stupid. You won't be able to. You're not willing to. But just as a thought experiment, if you spent 20 hours every week for 15 years reading or audiobooking or listening to podcasts, you wouldn't be able to not grow. Like you're going to start to learn something, even if you're an idiot and you're willfully thinking, I'm going to disregard everything. These people are stupid. I know better. They're dumb. You wouldn't be able to do it. After 15 years, you would just learn some stuff. Okay. So it's not brainwashing. It's washing your mind, right? Washing your mind. So, however, I would concede 2 things. First, that it is obviously there's faster ways to do it, right? Particularly in 2026. Like I did coach the versions of coaching groups that were available to me in 2011, but it was a different time because of course, if you work with somebody, we were talking about this before, Gabriel, that knows the landscape, they know your business, the thing you're always trying to figure out, the only thing you're figuring out is like, what is the next thing to fix? Right? We call it in our community the most important next action, right? Or Gary Keller calls it the one thing, because you always have a constraint of time, right? Even if you don't have kids and you're off the floor and not married and you just work every second, time will still be constrained. And it's just always going to be more efficient. Some things make more sense to do sequentially. So a lot of our internal systems and algorithms, which we continue to refine, is what is the next thing to fix that's going to have the biggest possible impact for the least amount of effort. Where people can get hung up, okay, and argue, I probably did this at points in my career, certainly when I was younger, is they're just trying to listen to thousands of despair. They're listening to 27 business podcasts. They keep changing their mind about what to do. They're not tracking their numbers deeply enough. There's no logic for what they do next. So they're spinning their wheels, and that's fine. And I often say, when I'm talking to someone that's considering doing the Unicorn Society, the reality is the people I most want to work with are the people that don't really need us. Like the best gym owners, they don't need us. You'll figure it out. There's enough out there. You're just going to do it the long, hard way. And ultimately, it's going to take more time and be more expensive. And that's fine. People can do whatever they want to do in their life, But ultimately, to my mind, at this point, again, I have a relationship with my mortality. I don't like if I can buy speed. And of course, this gets tricky, right? For twofold, because first of all, you do have to make good decisions on who to trust, right? And it's like there's varying levels of competence out there. But let me say the quiet part aloud, as the children would say. That's the thing kids say. They say the quiet part aloud, Dad. The quiet part aloud is part of what makes this vexing is you have to humble yourself. Okay. And this, by the way, gets real tricky for people to do what I do. And you can, I'm not, by the way, this is not like a shot, but you can kind of smell it a mile away. They're like, oh, they've got it all figured out now because they're the person saying all the words on the stage, So, for me, I feel like this at this point in my life, I'm probably almost pathologically like insecure maybe sometimes, but that's why I have no issue if I like, and I'm doing this all the time. I'll just cold outreach like a 27-year-old guy that's doing interesting stuff. So I can be like, hey, can I please come and learn from you? Can I please, I'll give you money. Can I just come and hang out with you for the day? I just want to see what you're doing. Like I am never not trying to learn more. And, again, I'm not saying I do this perfect. I have an ego, believe me. But I try to the extent that I can really commit to the lifelong learning process, which means that at any given moment, I know that my strongly held convictions, some of them are going to be wrong, right? I love that saying, strong opinions loosely held, right? You have to have some conviction against the winds. You have to make some claims. But ultimately, the other thing too, I think about this a lot too, like, I don't know. I hope there's like 20-year-olds right now they're gonna murder Mark Fisher Fitness. I hope there's a 20-year-old kid right now. I hope he does 10 million in 4,000 square feet, right? And I'll be in the grandpa old folks gym owner home, my rocking chair, being like, yeah, right? Because I most want to be an advocate for the industry. Like I get pumped when people win. I don't like feel competitive like that with other gym owners. I'm like, if you're doing awesome stuff, I just feel like we're all working together, So I think very much like. There's like the competitor collaborator. I'm very much the competitor. I'm like, let's all win. Let's all like do this. Let's all like make this industry awesome. Let's help the world. And yeah, that gets me fired up.
Why,
That's really good.
why your clients like at a certain point, like we have only 7 minutes remaining, but like, yeah, because like time is running and like we could do a 10-hour podcast, I think.
Yeah. We can do more. We can come back.
But time is constrained, as you said. So
yes.
that needs to be precious about on your website, for example, because like we will ask you where we can find you. So the business that you work with is like business for unicorns, so that help gym owners. On the website, I've not seen a lot of CrossFit gyms. Do you work with that point? What kind of business do you?
Yeah, we do a decent bit. It is interesting because at least in America, this is interesting and maybe inside baseball, but there's a very strong distinction between the approximately 25,000 gyms that in America that do strength gyms. Globally, they say we're thinking maybe 40K. And by the way, nobody really knows these numbers, but the best I can put together from friends of mine, the founders of companies like Push Press and Wodify and other people that do this sort of market research. The thing that is very interesting is does seem to be this cultural line that I think is starting to be breached between the 12,500 that are CrossFit gyms and then the strength training gyms. The CrossFit gyms, by and large, either were CrossFits, are CrossFits, or by DNA are CrossFit. There's a lot of the ethos, the culture, the business model, the brand feel, the athletic aspiration that is a very specific cultural brand, right? And again, we do work with some CrossFits, but typically they want, to be CrossFit. They want you to speak box, they want you to speak WOD, etc. Just as the 12,500 gyms on the other half tend to do more small group personal training. They tend to think of themselves as strength coaches, as prehab professionals, as clinicians. Particularly 15 years ago, those guys hated the CrossFit guys and there was real beef. And that half was like, you guys, CrossFit does Ramdo and you guys don't know training and you do Olympic lifts. CrossFit's great if you want to get hurt. That's what you should do, right? They were very like hoity-toity about it. And I think, 15 years later, there's still a little bit of a disparity. And I think that's starting to change in part because of the vendors, to be honest. Because what happens is companies like Biz for Unicorns now are starting to work with a lot more CrossFits. And then, a lot of the vendors that I work with, like Push Press, Wodify, Kilo, very good friends of mine, they're starting to work with the small group gyms. So the vendors are starting to split. But it's interesting because 10 years ago, CrossFit Games athletes would not have even heard of Perform Better or Mike Boyle Phil or maybe Dan John. And on the other hand, in the Perform Better, they don't know who any CrossFit athletes are. They've maybe heard of Greg Glassman. So I think there's a lingering cultural distinction that I think has impacted. Yeah, I think like some CrossFit sometimes are like, well, can they help me? They don't speak WOD. And, I think CrossFit particularly we're well situated for because we do strength training, but that is an interesting conversation in business, and maybe gym owners can think how this maps. As an example, we're pretty transparent right now. We will not work, and this is interesting, we will not work with yoga or Pilates or boxing or cycling. Generally, I say that we won't work, but do we? Yeah. Do I think we can help them? 100%. But from a branding marketing perspective, they want you to say studio, right? And they will say like, oh, well, you do. And this is like the client that's like, oh, well, I need, I only work at gyms that are specifically for 32-year-old guys that were athletes that work in finance. This guy's a 36-year-old guy, and he doesn't work in finance. So you can't help me. This gym isn't the right place for me. So there is a little bit of that is I think understandable, and a little bit of this kind of intentional marketing decision, because the more you expand your brand and who you're talking to, or particularly online, the more diffuse it comes. People aren't sure who you're for. So anyway, long way of saying, yes, we do work with CrossFits. And then typically, I think it's fair, the market tends to put us in the box more of non-CrossFit group strength training gyms, which don't even really have a name, actually.
No, that's fair. And I do agree with you seeing like the different like eras we had, and definitely interesting to take a look at everything and see, okay, where the market is, where the market was, and where the market is perhaps going to be going. But I guess that's going to be for another discussion. So yeah, Mark, where can people find you actually?
Yeah. The best place is businessforunicorns.com. If they go there, they can find a ton of free resources. Many people have seem to find value in the little book of gym marketing secrets, which I always joke is it's
behind you.
It is little,
Behind
but
you.
it's not. Yeah, it's behind me. But I will warn you, there aren't really any secrets. So there's no secrets, and arguably it's more of a pamphlet than a book. It's like 30 minutes. So if you just want it is, but however, it is a comprehensive overview that I think would map perfectly fine to France. I would love to hear if you read and you're like, here's a nuance, because I'm so fascinated by, particularly now, a lot of the work that I do. You've been pretending by the time this goes live, we're essentially like opening up essentially like a United Kingdom office. So we're doing more and more work internationally. And yeah, I would just say that, it's a definitely good overview of like all the things you can do if you want more leads and more clients. For a brick and mortar gym, it's not an unlimited number of plays you can run. So anyway, they can find that on the website. They can follow us at Business for Unicorns. If they like YouTube, you go to markfisheryoutube.com. But anyway, you can find all the other stuff on the website for resources and what we do with gym owners when we work with them.
Lovely stuff. Well, guys, if you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and also to check, because I think this is one of the most technical episodes we've had this far. Thank you a lot for making it such like value per second dense, I would say, Mark. Thank you a lot for that. No, it was really good. And if you go into the description, you're actually going to have like a good playbook with everything that we talked about today. So take a look at it.
Love to do that.
Because on this one, there's going to be this is going to be a pretty dense one. So go ahead, crack on this one, because I think you're going to love it. Well, thank you a lot, Mark. And yeah, hopefully for seeing you on another episode, because I really had a blast on this one.
Yeah, what a pleasure. What an honor. We'll definitely do it again.
No, thank you very much, brother.